Huntsville, Alabama, July 24th, 1969. A crowd of thousands gathers in Courthouse Square to cheer on the triumphant return of Dr. Wernher von Braun, just hours after Apollo 11's Columbia Command Module splashed down in the Pacific Ocean. The United States had achieved what many believed was impossible, putting a man on the moon. The picture ran in newspapers around America the following day, celebrating the genius rocket engineer who was behind it all.
Von Braun is a titan, he's one of the major figures of the last century, and he was way ahead of his time.
Von Braun adamantly believed that humanity's future was in space. He's the greatest voice we've had in the history of the space program.
Considered by NASA to be the father of rocket science, von Braun is credited with either inventing or helping to develop many of the most sophisticated aerial technologies that exist today, like the supersonic anti-aircraft missile, the ballistic missile, the first American satellite, and the first U.S. space vehicles, including the enormous Saturn V rocket that enabled man to reach the moon.
Without exaggeration, the Apollo program has been called the greatest achievement that mankind has ever accomplished. Without Wernher von Braun, we would not reach the moon. To date, the Saturn V is the most powerful rocket that we've ever built.
Von Braun's incredible engineering feats were matched only by his all-consuming crusade to send man into space. But who exactly was this engineering genius with such extraordinary visions for the future? Wernher von Braun was born March 23, 1912, in a small town in eastern Prussia, the second of three sons. Werner grew up a child of wealth and privilege, but while he was born into an accomplished family, Werner's keen intellect and unusual passions stood out. His father once said, "I don't know where his talent comes from," and stated on more than one occasion that he considered his son a mystery.
Wernher von Braun was multi-talented. Both sides of his brain were working. He could think about technical things and imagine rocketry and space travel, but he was an accomplished musician. And these traits manifested very early. I think his parents knew by the time he was 4 or 5 that he was very special. His mother gave him a telescope when he was young, and he looked at the moon and said, "I want to go there. I want to build the machine that will go to the moon." And of course he did half a century later.
The achievement of putting a man on the moon is something that was, at the time, really almost impossible and almost unthinkable. Wernher von Braun was obsessed with going to the moon and going to Mars from the time he was a little boy, and that was his destiny.
In his teens, von Braun wrote papers on orbital flight, and by the incredibly young age of 20, he was named the head of Germany's rocket program by Army Artillery Officer Captain Walter Dornberger.
When he worked towards one of his goals, he would apply himself and master a subject in very short order. He'd been trained as an engineer, and doing a PhD in physics is not trivial, and he got his PhD at an age when most German students were still undergraduates.
But how is it that Wernher von Braun, whose contemporaries included such scientific geniuses as Nikola Tesla, Robert Oppenheimer, and Albert Einstein, was so far ahead of everyone when it came to rocketry? And what was behind his obsession to travel to the stars? Some ancient astronaut theorists believe that the boy genius may have been guided by otherworldly forces.
Maybe he drew his inspiration from science fiction. Maybe it came from his own imagination and vision of what the future should be. Or maybe it was inspired by something extraterrestrial.
Some sort of extraterrestrial contact might have happened with Wernher von Braun. Something or someone might have reached him and saw where we needed to go as a civilization and gave him the tools and the insights that he needed to be able to build our way out into space.
Some have suggested that people like Albert Einstein, Tesla, that they've had this extraterrestrial intervention, that they have had access to this abundance of knowledge. And the question has arisen, did Wernher von Braun, was he also one of them? Because the vision he had, the ideas were incredible for their time.